today we will talk about Google Assistant and specifically about creating persona. So usually I give very technical talks where we show lots of codes, how to optimize apps, how to build them using Dialogflow. But today I was asked to talk about persona because they told me that this is something that is usually overlooked in the development, and that's why I just saw that it's important to, take an hour of time and just look back into the beginning when you just start creating. Just if you could raise quickly your hands, how often, or actually, first of all, how many of you published at least one Google Assistant application? Awesome, fantastic. So yeah, for those of you who didn't, for those of you who did, I'm sure you already did that really well, and maybe you will, help me and if I will miss something, you can just comment that at the end. But for those of you who didn't start it, I think it's very important to look back and before you actually jump onto writing code using Dialogflow, to just think about creating the really, really solid persona. And that's what we'll be talking about today. So first of all, a little bit about myself. So I'm Google Developer Expert GD for Google Assistant. I'm leading a Google Developer Group and Women Tech Maker Group in London. I'm mentoring brands and companies and individual developers at seed stage startup incubator organized by Google called Google Launchpad on both AI and marketing sides. I'm director at Motoword. This is a New York-based company. And before Motoword, I was working for different companies. I used to work for Google, for Todoist, for other companies. I did my PhD in quantum chemistry. And I'm UK STEM ambassador, which means I'm teaching kids how to code using Scratch, using Python, using microbit, all kinds of technologies. And what is probably relevant to for us today, I'm also a musician. So I used to work with voice a lot, and my parents, they work at television companies. So my mom used to work as a sound producer. So I grew up in the area of sound editing and sound development for quite a lot. I basically grew up looking at people doing sound design pretty much all my life. Yeah, and I'm also a speaker at different conferences. This year I'm talking at almost 40 conferences in 14 different countries, including France, so I'm really excited to be here. So yeah, jumping to the actual topic of the voice assistant. So voice revolution, I actually call it voice evolution because this is the long way. And technology came all the way through the speech recognition, through machine learning, so that at the end of the day, we actually have and are ready for Google Assistant. So this is not something that happened overnight to Google or any other company. So there is a major shift in technology every 10 years. And if you look at this, you have to think about this way. Every time new technology comes up, there are always 3 stages. First stage is always people get crazy about technology. People get really, really excited. It's called frenzy. And this is the first stage where the technology is really raw and really fresh. And then technology gets adopted, and people start using it, people start developing for that. And then the last stage is called maturity or scalable. The technology is being scaled to the large level, where already not so early adopters start using technology. Let's say, think about Android now. Pretty much every single person, every single grandma has now Android on their phone. So this is something that is not really so fresh and new anymore. And at that time, where people get adopted, and it gets scaled, the new technology comes in, and this is it was happening for quite a long time. So the last technology, in my personal opinion, is AI and assistant. Some people would argue with me and tell me that this is VR AR. Good for you. I really hope that these 2 technologies don't need to compete necessarily. They can just coexist and be both really exciting for us as developers. So for me, the whole excitement about Google Assistant started when Sundar Pichai posted already 2 years ago now on his blog that we are now coming to the AI-first world where technology is everywhere, it's at home, it's on the way, it's at work, and this is something that we have to pay attention to. So obviously, development of machine learning didn't start at that time, but it was something that made us all pay attention to. Probably this is like a next big thing. So my first kind of marketing impression that this is something that could be useful for brands. And I know we are not, here marketers all, but I think it's important for us to think about also our future clients, because some of us are using Google Assistant as a tool, to get clients as a part of agency or, working with brands, because it's important, just to get money for our work. And the Gary Vee, probably the best marketer in the world, he said that voice is the future. And if we will build our startups, doesn't matter, it can be product startup, your own brand, your own product, or if you will build an agency which is building Google Assistant apps for other brands, you can become as big as Facebook, Instagram, Pandora. So this is something that I think is relevant for us as developers, because if we jump on that wagon right now, we are not that late yet. Now people ask me, people sometimes tell me, yeah, but we are quite early, we don't even know, maybe it will die in a few years. So I think we are not early at all. I think we're actually quite late, because if you look just at Google Assistant store, the App Store, there are right now more than 1 million apps for Google Assistant alone. We're not talking about Amazon Alexa, there are like another million there. So we're quite late, we're not really late. That I would definitely encourage you to look into Google Assistant as soon as possible. And not wait, when it will mature and there is no chance for you to compete with big apps. Now, quickly, the world of voice assistants, just for those of you to kind of remind what is kind of out there. Now, just one thing I wanted to point you out here. So some people tell me that, well, Google Assistant came to the market quite late. Maybe we should focus, on Amazon Alexa instead. So it's totally up to you. I used to also develop for Amazon Alexa, so no problem there. But Google Assistant, while it came in 2016, the underlying technology was developed by Google for many, many years, and that includes machine learning, speech recognition, artificial intelligence. So Google has that huge back which they brought when they actually developed and launched Google Assistant. And that, if you remember, there was a Google Now, which was using, voice technology as well. But even before that, Google used to do a lot of things out there. Now, why Google Assistant? Lots of devices out there which are already enabling Google Assistant, and you can use it on them directly. And this is just a few devices. Everybody's probably really excited about Google Home Hub, which was just launched in 9th October. But this is just a few, really few devices which are using Google Home, Google Assistant in their hardware. And as a hardware company, if anybody here is from hardware company, you can even enable Google Assistant on your device using Assistant SDK. So no problem there. Then languages. So by the end of this year, we will have all these languages, and pretty much it's almost end of this year. So at Google I/O, I'm sure lots of you have been to Google I/O this year. Google promised to launch in all these countries and all these languages. That's a lot. And just from my personal experience, I can tell you that localization is actually one often not so hidden, but often forgotten secret. Like when I localized one of my actions to 2 different languages besides English, I immediately saw 4.2 increase in usage comparing to English market. Even though people usually say, yes, USA, and UK are one of kind of 2 biggest markets. It's not so true. Yes, they're big, but when, let's say, German market, which I localized into, when they have just few apps, in the health category, and then your app comes in, and that's still, early stage. Obviously, people will just notice that because there are probably just 6 apps there, and one of them is just yours. So definitely don't forget about that. Now, that was like an introduction for those of you who didn't yet develop for Google Assistant, to motivate you a little bit and show you that this is a really good platform. Now, what is persona? So oftentimes I hear developers telling me, yeah, the persona is something like, I'm not a marketer, I'm not a psychologist. I heard all kind of things, people telling me, I'm not, the business person, I'm just a developer. Amazing. Do you remember like 8 years ago, like 2010, when Android just was like really quite ugly, let's put it this way, and lots of developers were telling each other, we don't need designers, we can just build app and they will come. And now if you look at the Google Play market, if your app is ugly, no matter how amazingly functional it is, there is no chance for you to succeed. This same way, persona is UX. Persona is UX for voice. It's part of UX, and you definitely, I would encourage you to build persona. This is just because since there is no visual design in the Google Assistant apps, this is something that kind of substituted, and it stands between you and your user even before you actually do something. This is the either wall or a handshake which you can make towards your user. So the conversation is really, really natural to us. It happened for many years throughout history. And if you look at this graph, you can see that spoken language is so much older than our communication with computers. What does it make, think us? We have to adapt and adopt the real human interaction and try to interact with computer the way we interact between humans. We have to make it as natural as possible. Now, it's important. I am not encouraging you to try to hide from user that they're talking to machine. And there are lots of, scandals around after Duplex demo where people should be aware that this is a robot. Obviously, they have to, or they might be to be able, or to be, maybe it's a good idea to be aware. But in this case, it's all about usability. It's all about natural things. Just like a simple example. Imagine SMS reading app. So what would be easier? The first scenario is when I'm saying as an assistant app, in order to read this message, say read. In order to delete this message, say delete. In order to read the next message, say read the next message. Why would you do that? I mean, obviously, you have to make it so obvious so that user actually knows that delete means delete message. So you should not overflow your assistant with unnecessary instructions. Now, persona. So persona, oftentimes people think that this is kind of like a mental state, but important here in all this description is that this is something which goes outside. So it's not something like inside I am, an evil but also a kind person. No, this is something which is public, which is other people see you in that state, not inside side. And that's kind of, we will come also later. Later I will also show you why person and persona is actually completely different things. But yeah, everybody got at least one persona, okay? So on the left side, you see there is a business person. For example, in the office, they are really, official, they're really formal. Or there is maybe some breakdancer who is also drawing graffiti, so all his life is a little bit, hip and happening. Then we have clown. Maybe he's, when he's around people, he's always, having fun and always like so, kind of silly. On the right side, I put a few photos from my life. So to show you that, so on the left side, there were different people, right? On the right side, it's one person, but it's different situations. So I'm an international speaker, but at the same time, I'm also a mom. And at the same time, also a friend and a wife. And this is something that every single person here has lots of different personas, in their lives. Maybe you are also cooking, so you are kind of a chef, but then maybe you're, in the evening you have a hobby, you are, singing in a restaurant. So all of them, and people often forget, so one person can have several personas, that's important. And so developing persona is not just about voice. So there are lots of things that include. So of course, persona and voice design and sound design is extremely important. And there are several ways to develop sound design. And we'll briefly touch. So today's talk is actually, so normally I give it as a 4-hour kind of workshop, but in order to kind of make it really, really short, I want to kind of summarize it so that when you are interested in something, you just Google it, okay? So sound design, and there is a visual content. So remember the launch of smart speakers, okay? So in smart speakers, you have a visual component. And this is really as important as sound design. You have your either branding, or you have maybe something, some beautiful background. You have your typography. So every single brand has their own typography. And that also affects the mood. And of course, you have the whole interaction design. It's either a table, or it's a carousel, or it's, some cards, some lists. So there are lots of things which affect your interaction and your persona. So this is just for you to remember, persona is much more than just voice. It's broader than that. Next, so just an example of one of my applications. So just give you the context. So I gave keynote at DroidCon Dubai earlier this year in April, and the weather was really, really hot. So I have a really small daughter who was like 1.5 at that time, and weather was plus 54 Celsius, which is like a lot. And as a like somebody who has a really light skin, I burn really easily. So I thought, let me ask Google Assistant, what is the UV index? Do I need a sunscreen? And I naively actually thought that UV index is part of the Google weather application. So I asked Google Assistant, what is the UV index? Do I need, sunscreen in Dubai? And it turns out Google weather doesn't provide this information about sun radiation per default. So all Google Assistant offered me was to read out loud a Wikipedia article about sun protection and sun radiation, which was useless for me because I needed exactly, answer for this particular city for that particular day. So what do developers do when they don't find something, out there? They develop that. So that's what I did. I developed the UV index application, which is also providing the tips about cover the kind of sun protection. So all you need to do is you need to ask, do I need sunscreen? Let's say in Nantes, and that's I asked yesterday. So definitely you don't need sun protection in Nantes. It's really, really low value. And here you can see. Remember I told you about visual component. So sometimes people use visual component for branding. If you have your logo, you have like a typical background like Burberry has, right, the brand. But in this case, I use the background image in order to show the scale. So I used visual to make it functional. Because when you get the value 2, you don't understand what is it. But in order to make it clear where is the 2 in that scale, I put it as a background image. So this is just an example. And you see emoji, I could definitely customize text, make it different font, maybe make it like kind of curly kind of letter, so to make it more attractive. I'm not a big fan of kind of written font, but definitely if you want to change font, you can definitely go ahead and do that to basically customize it, and that all will be part of persona. Now, why persona design is so important? So even after all this, people still ask me, so why? Why should I spend time? That is definitely a lot of time, so you should actually sit at least a couple of evenings and write everything down. So there is no such things as no persona. So people sometimes tell me, well, okay, like my app will have no persona. And unfortunately, it will. But if you want to work explicitly, spend your time on developing persona. So that will be just completely random pieces of persona. Maybe one answer will be, from one persona because this is, you wrote it today. And then the next week you will be in the different mood and you will write something else. So those all will be kind of broken pieces of completely random person. Imagine a person which you are talking to, and you got like you imagine, okay, this person is probably like from like with good education, that particular age, that particular gender, and then you meet that same persona, and suddenly he talks like he got no education and he's 10 years younger. That would be just really confusing for us, right? Because we get used to the thought that persona is that particular one. Now, when people hear voice, what is important, they automatically assign persona. And we actually, we encounter this many times in our lives. So just when somebody called you on the phone and you pick up, and just within like literally 1 minute, you have absolutely really strong idea who is this person. First, is it a man or a woman? What is the age approximately? Is he a teenager? Is he maybe already retired on kind of older age, right? Did he get an education? What is his vocabulary? Also, where is he, in terms of social context? Is he formal? Is he your boss? Is he your servant? Is he your buddy? So you get that idea really quickly. And the same way, just like you get it from a phone call from some random stranger, you get it when you interact with Google Assistant. So well-defined persona is also very important. So if some of you will, decide to create either brand or launch an agency, it's also really important in order to increase usage of your application. So there are actually specific studies by Google where they showed in case studies that when you have a well-developed persona, you actually increase retention and increase usage, and of course brand loyalty, because people just get used to, get attached to your character. And the personality cannot be avoided. So just like I mentioned to you, when somebody calls you, this is what you get. You get age, you get gender, you get education, you get register. Register is that the level of formality, you know, body, teacher, servant, and then you get locale, which is an accent. So we all can identify accent unless we have the same one. So then we cannot hear that. But you can definitely understand if you know from Britain or from States or maybe from Australia. So those kind of things, or from France, Italy. So those all things come immediately, again, within 1 minute of interaction. Now there are also inferred states here, which come a bit later, 2-3 minutes. But this is also when you interact with persona, it can affect your perception of persona. So you can understand the person is intelligent or not. You can understand if you can trust the person. So this is some of my favorite world political leaders now at the moment. So I definitely trust them. And if you like the person, so I definitely like my daughter, so, but definitely you understand those inferred traits as intelligence, trust, worthiness, or likability. So experience is the brand. So I will just give you an idea very quickly again. If you work as a brand, doesn't matter. You can be a solo, developer, indie developer. Still, if you run, let's say, social media or anything beyond app or beyond website, every single touch point with your product matters. So if you are a big brand, you would have billboard design, you would have website, you would have radio, TV advertisement, maybe some pop-up events, maybe social media, and then you will have, mobile apps, you will have voice apps. So every single encounters, every single place where people, user interact with you. It can be just, mobile app and voice app. That's okay. They will have to have the same persona. So I hope that if you are a mobile developer, you already developed persona. If you didn't, you have to go back to the drawing board and check, so that the dialogues, all the images, they're all consistent across. Even though voice doesn't have images as a normal kind of app, as a not optimized app, you still have to check, is it a formal app? Is it maybe informal? All these kind of things. And I will show you a specific example to make it easier. So how do I design persona? And this is like, I wanted to make it as specific as possible. And I took actually one of my apps to actually show you, instead of just telling, about a hypothetical app which doesn't exist. So I took 2 apps. One is the sunscreen check, which I told you about. Really, really easy. You either ask what is the UV index, or you ask, do I need sunscreen? It's that simple. And the second one, not mine, it's Time Out London, is one of the world's biggest. I'm pretty sure it's actually in France as well. I don't know if it's in Nantes, but it's basically all information about parties, restaurants, events in your city. And that's the British magazine, so I kind of thought I will show you quickly those 2 brands. So the first one is to understand the brand. And it's really, really important. So if you're a solo developer, you don't have all kind of stakeholders. But if you're a brand, you have to talk to every single, decision maker at your company. You have to understand, marketing's perspective, brand manager perspective, maybe customer experience. Then you have to, of course, if you're a big brand, you will have a style guide where you will definitely have things like a tone. Are we friendly? Are we funny and silly? Are we, a luxury brand which is trying to be, we are cool, we are fancy, and there are all kind of things. So I used to work with different brands. Definitely, I have seen lots of different style guides. So definitely look into that, because lots of things already written there. You don't need to, come up with something new. Then definitely check all the promo materials. Again, some brands just come up with really funny and silly ads. So if it's the case, your voice app, cannot be really formal and really serious. It has to be aligned with your brand book. And then, of course, you can check, social media, blog, to just get an idea. Or if it's a retail, a funny story, you should check that as well. So basically, just like last week, or two weeks ago already, I went to 2 stores in the shopping center. One was Louis Vuitton, and another was Converse. And like, if you still, not convinced that persona is important, just go to a bit like different stores. And in Converse store in London, they greeted me like, hey, what's up? Like, how is going, these days? Like, do you want to check this, like shoes? So it was really, really informal. It was more like, I am a dude, like more than like a customer, rather than a customer. And I was like, even like at some point, like, do I know you like, I didn't ask, but like it was really like he knows me really, really well. And that is persona. That is the, so basically that shop assistant, he captured the essence of the brand, which is of course, you know, well, nobody beyond 60 probably, you know, wears Converse, etc., etc. So it's really informal. And then I walk in Louis Vuitton, literally 10 minutes later, same clothes, same, you know, same me. And they greet me, you know, like, would you like, you know, a cup of tea? Well, which is, they never offer coffee because it's London. So they definitely, you know, brought me catalog, and they wanted to show me the latest collection. And they asked me, like, you know, could you please be so kind, you know, to spend a few minutes, you know, checking this latest bags, etc. So you can see that the persona of these two brands in retail stores, and they get it always right. So go to a few big brands. I mean, you don't need to go especially, but next time you're in a shopping center, in order to feel persona, just do that exercise. It's amazing. It's really impressive. So yeah, coming back to sunscreen check. So you can see here that sunscreen check, it gives you the even description gives you idea of safety, idea of being helpful, and it shows you that the app wants you to be safe, you know, stay safe. So it doesn't give you an idea that maybe, you know, tan is beautiful. Not at all. It's actually neither beautiful nor healthy. I can tell you as a chemist. And it tries you know, to prevent skin cancer. So it's all about being, you know, confident, being an expert, being, you know, encouraging and helpful. Now, timeout, on the other hand, the brand values are different. So when you read description, so Tio is the name of the girl who they picked as the real character, as a real persona behind the brand, behind the brand. And so Tio is a girl who actually got, you know, a few tips for you. If you want to visit parties, you can, you know, just get her as a buddy. And she will tell you about all the coolest events which are going on in London, you know. And she's hip at happenings. So she's really, you know, fancy to show everything around. And her language is completely different. She is bold, she's hip, she's, you know, exciting, she's friendly, she's delightful. She's just that, you know, girl you would always want to have, no matter if you're a girl or boy, best girlfriend, best, you know, you know, friend forever, ever. So now, step number 2, once we define those brand values, and by the way, it should be 4 to 6. It shouldn't mean, you know, like you don't try to come up with like 20 different adjectives. It's not needed. 4 to 6. Second step is to understand the user. So here you go through the user journey. What is the app which supposed to do? So in my case, for example, it either tells you UV index, or it tells you, do I need sunscreen? So, and it gives you tips. Let's say index is 2. Don't worry about sunscreen. Index is 11, you better stay inside. Or, you know, use SPF, whatever, 40. So those kind of things. So you have to write down user expectations. So what user might expect from your app. For example, initially, my app was just telling UV index. And then I realized, okay, what do I do with UV index, right? I should give some tips, because the index alone doesn't really say me much. So this is the user expectations. And in case of sunscreen, check who would be interested in that app. It's probably mid-30s or up, and they're interested in health, longevity, working out. So usually people who, you know, don't think that tan is, you know, fancy and tan is healthy. They actually do care about health. Now, in case of timeout, it's late teens to mid-30s. So people who like already kind of got money to party, and they're interested in food, good food, you know, food places, eateries, in nightlife, and potentially dating. So this is that kind of age and that kind of public. Now, number 3, we should understand the task. So in case, so this is really easy. This is probably the easiest part. So you should understand the task. First app which I developed is about UV index and sun protection information, and then timeout is about culture, entertainment, food, events information. This is kind of something, if you have mobile app, you already know that. Just need to think, you know, how voice app, like which of those informations can be, you know, easily kind of transferred to voice app, not copied, transferred. Now, choose the medium. So here there are two different mediums. You either pick text-to-speech, which is the computer-generated, synthesized voice, or you pick custom recordings. Now there are different apps which choose different ways. This is totally up to you. And yeah, I personally right now use text-to-speech since it's quite costly to use actors, real human actors. But I wanted to kind of show you pros and cons. So briefly, you don't need to read this everything. I will kind of summarize for you. So text-to-speech is of course really much cheaper. It's not actor, and it's also faster because Google already did the whole work for you. Then it's really good, which is particularly important for me because I really believe in localization and I love languages. That's why I think that it's much easier for me to use text-to-speech where localization is already built in, as opposite, hiring 10 different actors for every single language and recording. It takes money, time, efforts, and I just, at this moment of my life, I just don't have that. But if you do, as a brand, definitely like Headspace, for example, the meditation app. Actually, its founder, he's reading the whole monologue of the meditation by himself. Because, they got money and, they got the founder, who is a really good voice actor. And then cons. So of course it's limited voice availability because you only got like that many voices out there on a text-to-speech comparing to all kind of voices among human actors. Then of course there are errors in the melody of speech. So I recommend you personally library. I won't go into technical details, but you can find me later if you want. But there is this SSML library where you can using that library add pause, you can add some silence in your speech, some breathing, so that it makes it much more natural than the usual text-to-speech. But definitely check that library it's called SSML. And yeah, it will sound less robotic using the library, but still it's of course sounds quite unnatural, which is okay in some ways in some apps, but maybe not okay when you do meditation. Or you make some, comedy app where you just cannot give that humorous kind of feeling through the text-to-speech. And then custom recording is, of course, natural. It's human. It's super expensive, but it can be really expressive. It can convey all this meaning, all these jokes, all this humor, and what else? And it's really hard to localize because you will need to find actor for every single voice. Now, we came to one of the, I think this is the one before last step. So this is like the most important step, is the actually creating a character. So here, again, we are focusing on these two actions. But of course, whatever your action, is, if you need any help, later you can find me. We can just sit together and work on your app. I will be here all day. So yeah, remember I told you about the register? So there are 3 levels. There is degree formality called friend or peer. And that one can be like playful, casual, silly. Then there is a second register, which is thoughtful, proactive, concise, and that is usually helper. Something like some people would call servant. I like helper more, but this is something like a second kind of type, second level of formality. And then there is the last one, which is advisor, teacher. Some people call it boss, but this is like a patient, helpful, encouraging. But this is like a bit higher level. It's kind of more. More knowledgeable than the user, something like that. Now, people often make a mistake, and when they develop persona, they actually just pick randomly, okay, so my persona will be body, So what you should actually do, you should develop your app's persona for all 3 levels. That's important. And then later, you have to check, okay, sunscreen check from body sounds weird. I probably want to hear it from somebody who is more knowledgeable than me, who is smarter than me. So you have to develop it for all 3 formality levels versus just one. Because yes, you've got instinct. Probably that level would be better, but you should still develop it for all 3 and pick it later. Try it, all 3, and then see which one. Because sometimes there are just surprises. You cannot know for sure. Sometimes you would think that this is the best level, but then later when you show friends, you show colleagues, the other one might be better. Now, remember I told you that persona is not person. So this is just one of the, just few examples where persona is not a person. So persona can be anthropomorphized animal. And I just gave 2 examples. There are like lots of them, like Mickey Mouse, you know, like this is like a Rudolph reindeer, red nose. And then there is a Easter bunny. So all kind of personas who are just animals, anthropomorphized animals. Then there is alien, who is also persona, actually excellent persona. Then if you want, you can have, you know, artificial intelligence persona, which is also totally normal. Or you can have cartoon character like Tinkerbell. Or you can have a mixture where, let's say Peppa Pig, my daughter's favorite cartoon. It's actually both anthropomorphized animal, but also cartoon character. So it's totally okay for you to have persona who is not a person. That is like the important takeaway from here, okay? Because people often even like just, you know, keep saying person instead of persona. The persona is persona. Now, coming back to developing persona. So first we should do the bio. So we should actually, and people often times, of course, naturally lazy and they don't want to write it down, but it's really, really useful. Now, in the community of people, of Google Assistant people, there is a one kind of thing we're arguing still about. Some people say that you should not focus on gender and age because it's kind of limiting character. I personally think that it's important to write age, but it's totally up to you. So if you don't want to, because the age is kind of, you know, it will change the how slowly you speak or fast you speak, or how big you are, how, you know, how, I don't know, your experience, life experience. So I think it changes a lot. So let's say just focus on the sunscreen action, okay? So who do we want to get information about protection of our skin and protecting us from skin cancer? Probably is a doctor who is not really, really young. So I put here like 45 kind of ish, you know. Then he's doctor. So I'm coming from Germany. That's why I put here Stuttgart, Germany, where I live pretty much all my adult life as his hometown. Because I personally believe that Germany is a, you know, place where all best doctors in the world are, and lots of people go there, you know, for dentistry, etc., for surgery. He's quite tall, and he's, you know, like got that kind of solid built kind of bodies. He's slightly gray-haired, which means that he probably been to some, you know, tough times, maybe in his practice, like a medical practice, where he's seen maybe something that, you know, some tough situations. But he also got experience through that. So this is something, and then he's also, the solidly built means that he's also, you know, strong. He's more like, you know, confident. He's, yeah, and then his current residence is one of my favorite cities in Germany, Munich. So his wife is also a doctor. Why it's important? Because the whole family is focused, you know, they are all, this is more than just his job, you know, 9 to 6. Maybe they're even talking at the tea, you know, like today I, you know, try to self, you know, gave this advice to a patient, and, you know, my patient, you know, got fully recovered today. Maybe their profession goes way beyond their daily job. And then they have 2 children, which means that he got this amazing family values, where he is not a party person who, you know, like finishes his doctor job and then goes to some nightclub. He's actually a dedicated father. And then his education is one of the best European universities, which is also a really old one. And then spare time, he is doing fitness and herbarium. Why herbarium, you would say? Because it's a detail-oriented person who is, you know, a patient also, which is important in the doctor's job. His parents are both doctors, well, both kind of in medicine, which means that this is something that he grew up with, those values to, you know, save lives, to dedicate yourself all your time to medicine. This is something that goes through the whole family. And they're both from Germany, so he got no siblings. Why siblings are important? So usually when you've got siblings, you, especially as a younger sibling or like one of the youngest siblings, you are usually like silly and crazy. You are usually, because you know, okay, your elder one will, you know, either cover you or help you with homework, so you're usually less responsible. He got none. So he, you know, got all the responsibilities to himself. He is working, he's really stable. So he's working for a long, long time already, his current job. And yeah, his pop culture picks, he loves geeky shows, which means that he's modern, but also he is still geeky. It's not some love drama or something. And his singer choice is something that is little bit maybe old school in terms, not because they're old, the singers, but because he doesn't like probably like electronic music. They are really, you know, they both are classically trained musicians. So this is just to give you an idea. Of course, your persona will be different. But once you write it down, why we do that, why we need that, do you feel like you know the person? Can you imagine the person? Do you see the doctor in front of you? Do you trust the doctor? So I do. And this is something I would definitely want advice from. And this is a really good exercise, especially when you have some some unusual applications, some games, etc. So you might not be easily knowing like who my user is talking to. So definitely write it all down. And then, so just quickly, remember at the beginning I showed you this brand attribute, confident, expert, so that's what you do. So when you try to bring those personal attributes, you always think about the brand attributes. So if you need your brand to be confident and safe and expert, then he probably should be, doesn't need to be doctor, it can be also lawyer or anything. Well, lawyer doesn't fit in my case, but he could be a lawyer, he could be, I don't know, parachute jumping trainer, whatever. You probably trust those people, right? Now, you write down monologue. So I didn't write down monologue here because it's a long kind of thing to read it out loud. But just imagine your person talking about completely different things. Like, how would they talk about breakfast? So if doctor would talk about breakfast, it would be probably like, I ate, really, carb-rich, sandwich, which also got like this and that. So it would be probably still something that includes, his personality. And then the most important things where all Google Assistant developers are starting with, even if they forgot or like just got too lazy to develop persona, they all start with writing dialogue. So no flowcharts like a regular, development, but you start with dialogue. You create a dialogue for all possible scenarios. Now, if you are not really into, talking to yourself or like talking to paper, you can just talk to, your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your colleagues, and just talk to them like I'm an app which gives this information, like what would you ask me, just write it down, and that will help you with developing persona later. So this is just kind of quickly how it looks like. So I will skip my app, but I really wanted to show you just one screen from the Time Out London, where if you ask the persona, where are you from, it tells you, in West Kensington, born and raised. On the estate was there, I spent most of my days. So she actually talks in a kind of rhyme way. And she tells that she got broke, and her mom told her to get the job. So it's really, really kind of, like I told you, hip and happening. She's really like a party girl who is also really knowledgeable, by the way. So this is important, by the way, to include into your persona. So when you're developing, this is important to remember to actually create dialogues which capture that essence. So if it's informal, the whole conversation should be really informal. And then user testing. I won't go deep because this is like the separate talk which we can cover. But of course, user testing includes what? It includes, talking to people and trying to understand, did you actually capture the essence of your persona? Do people actually trust that person? Does it, go aligned with your brand values? What's next? So quickly, in the last 5 minutes, I wanted to give you a few book recommendations. This is my favorite. So one of them is actually from the Google Conversation Design team from author. And then 2 others are also really, really good. So definitely, if you are still not convinced or not sure or just want to learn more, definitely check them out. They're all amazing. Of course, there are more, but this is kind of, I think, 3 my favorite ones. Then there is this website. So I wanted to point out, usually design document is like the last thing developers check, but in this case, it's actually voice design, so it's not, they won't show you as always, like, so buttons should be, this blue, and it should be like aligned to the left or center. In this case, they will actually help you to create persona and also help sometimes you don't know, like, for example, if an action doesn't understand your input, doesn't understand user's voice, when should you give up asking, like, can you tell me again? Can you tell me again? Like, I didn't understand. Can you tell me again? So this document will tell you, after 3 times, your app should give up. If there is no voice, no match, or all kind of different errors which you should use in your application, this voice document is like the first thing I would recommend you to check in order to, before you get started. And then, of course, there is like a Google document, the developer document, which I'm sure all of you will just find by Googling. Then there are code labs. So important is Code labs are, of course, for development, but if you look at the second row, you will see that there is a special code lab for developing character. So if you don't have like an hour time to do the regular code lab, you can just go, take half an hour and create a character for your future application. And then later you can do code labs number 1, number 2, number 3, the most advanced one, actually the latest one. I think it's like, what, 2 weeks old? Really, really new. And yeah, so definitely code labs are really amazing and they're developed in a really detailed way. Now, you tell me, okay, so that's all good, but like, how do I feel if I actually, did a successful application? Okay, like, for example, 100 users. Is it a lot? Is it not a lot? Should it be like 2,000 users? Because, again, since the market is relatively young, it's hard to have the industry benchmarks, Like, my competitor has this much, my competitor has that much. Sometimes you just won't have competitors yet. That's why Google created such program, of course not just for this, but Google created such program to encourage you. So I don't wear this t-shirt, but basically they give you a t-shirt after you develop one application and publish it. Really cool t-shirt with the Google Assistant logo like everywhere. And then you get also badges. I will show you, these are actually physical badges. You get them when you reach particular kind of level of either usage or engagement. So definitely you will feel much more encouraged once your app, and you will feel, okay, I reached some level, when I feel confident and I feel that, my app is actually popular. So unfortunately, I don't have badges with me. I got 2 types. I think the first and third one, since they're still on the way from Mountain View. But definitely, this is something that you might be, I don't want it to be your only motivation, of course. We're all adults here, I mean, it's just badge. But I definitely encourage you to try to reach those levels because they mean that your app is being used. And this is, of course, the biggest, encouragement for all of us as developers. And yeah, this is the last slide, is just resources for you to get started.